Hi, Hunter Hastings here. It's an exciting time in business. There are new ways of pleasing customers, new business models, new relationships with customers and consumers, new innovations, lots of new pathways to entrepreneurship. The dynamics are accelerating. But one of the places where maybe the change is not happening as fast as it should is in business education. Certainly not if we look at the traditional university and the MBA, the Masters in Business Administration. That's what it teaches. Administration, a lot of tools, a lot of methods, finance, strategy, planning, spreadsheet management. It's all within fairly tight boundaries and doesn't reflect the dynamism of how we need to think in this new dynamic business world. And so we're going to talk about today with Mark Packard, the future of business education. Mark is a professor of business and entrepreneurship at Florida Atlantic University, and he's also the research director for FAU's Madden Center for Value Creation. So he's always thinking about new ways in which businesses can create value, new ways to grow the economy, new ways to grow your firm. And so he's the perfect expert to talk to us about the future of business education.
This is the Value Creators Podcast. Value creation is the sole purpose of any business and every business, and for all of us as entrepreneurs. Listen to great value creators as they share their successes, trials, and lessons learned. Join us as we explore how to think as value creators, how to act as value creators, and how to view business through the lens of value creation.
Mark, welcome to the Value Creators Podcast.
Hey, Hunter. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you here. We're going to talk about business education today, mostly in the future. And to give it some context, I hear a lot of talk among the folks in the business world about the new management, the next management, the new way of thinking about management, reinventing management, those kinds of terms. And I think it comes because the old, what we might call industrial era, or the 20th century ways of management, which are all about processes and methods and mathematics and that kind of thing, don't work as well with the new business models in the digital age. It doesn't seem to apply. So I see in you a lot of new thinking coming from practitioners, especially from Silicon Valley and other concentrations of new technology, but not from business schools, it doesn't seem. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I see you shaking your head. You teach at a top 20 business school at Florida Atlantic University. Give us a big picture kind of overview of how you're thinking about business education and maybe what's wrong with it, where it needs to go, and then we'll delve into the details.
Sure. The whole education model that we have today is a very old one. This university model has existed for a very long time. There's been very little innovation to it, but it's worked for the most part for a very long time. And so I understand the institutional resistance to change, but at the same time, there has been so little entrepreneurship in education, and especially at this level of education, that it is and has been very ripe for disruption. Here at FAU, we've got a great school. We've got great faculty that are well published. They're great researchers. They know a lot. They're good. It's still a public university. It's still that same model, and so there's a whole lot of resistance to change. There's a whole lot of inefficiencies in not just the way we teach, but also just the way the school runs as an organization. So there's a lot of waste. And so, I've listened to some of, the stuff coming out of the private sector, I should say. And I think they're right. I think we're primed for disruption. I think we need entrepreneurs. And so, as a professor at a university, I'm expecting my job to be disrupted, and hopefully maybe I can end up on the forefront of it, one of the disruptors rather than the disrupted. But something needs to change. What we teach is stale. It's problematic in a lot of ways, and it's very non-entrepreneurial. And so we're really teaching our students to be business administrators, right? We have a degree in business administration, but administration is not what we need in today's workplace. We need entrepreneurial leaders. And so we need to change our curriculum as well as the way we do education.
So one of the things that's refreshing about your approach, I think, Mark, is your willingness to start at the level of philosophy. In past discussions, we've used subjectivism as a way to describe a different philosophy as opposed to positivism. That's not really the language of business, so we'll try and maybe put some business language around that. Another kind of parallel way of thinking is the increased understanding or thinking about left brain dominant thinking versus right brain dominant thinking, where the left brain is the business administration part. It loves lists and maths and spreadsheets and rules, and the right brain is much more kind of creative and holistic. So I don't know whether that's a good parallel, but let's talk about subjectivism and how that would apply in business.
Yeah, so subjectivism is a philosophy of science, and particularly of social science, that holds the individual's intentionality at its core, where people are not just these predictable automatons reacting to stimuli in the environment, which is how a lot of psychology and even economics tends to treat people. But they're individuals that have their own ends, and values that change over time. And so when you put the individual's subjective perceptions and ends and expectations at the core of a science, you get to a very different place scientifically, where you have to start with individuals and their ends as the starting point, rather than trying to basically assume they will behave predictably as we expect in some kind of econometric model or something like that. So that's the core of subjectivism. And I think where you're going is that is the right way to think about social science and management science and economics. It is a better way, but all of our whole paradigm in economics and in business has been objectivist, positivist, right? Treating people as predictable. And it's leading us into bad theories. It's leading us to develop tools that are not as successful as they should be.
Okay. So you and I attempted in the past a kind of indication of how that subjectivist thinking might change how we think about business. We called it 26 ways to think better about business. Now that I apply myself to that, I say, boy, making a list of 26 things is a very left-brain positivist thing to do. So maybe we shouldn't have done that. But let's highlight a couple of them. Well, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, the left brain, right brain thing is probably a good metaphor, but I mean, we do have to predict people, right? In business and everywhere, we have to. I mean, we have to predict what our actions will do. We have to predict what people want, and so we do have to make predictions. We have to, and data do help us do that. So I don't want to be misconstrued as advocating that we shouldn't do kind of data and analysis. I think left brain thinking is very important. It's just we have to remember that people have their own values and intentions, and we can't just dictate them. So go ahead, though.
No, you're right. And in fact, McGilchrist, the guy who specializes in this left brain, right brain thinking analysis, emphasizes it's the combination of the two. The problem is the left brain gets too dominant. We don't have a balanced viewpoint. So a couple of things that we suggested. business should focus on value experiences for customers, which I think is where you started, as the purpose of business rather than things like financial performance. So how would that manifest itself in practice, do you think, Mark?
Well, I mean, you can think of a couple of companies that really do this, like Amazon, for example, or Apple, where they start with what the user will get out of it first, what their experience will be like, and they reverse engineer a design that maximizes that. Too often, entrepreneurs in particular, but businesses also, they come up with ideas that they think are great, and they go after them, they develop them, then they take it to the prototype level and go out and they find out when people start using them, some of these challenges with the design, and they hone and refine it. And in the end, what they have is a design that is suboptimal, that is not designed with the value experience first. And so the customer is always right is a mantra that we hear, but I mean, their experience of value was what really matters. Not even what they say they want, but what they actually enjoy in their experience, or don't enjoy. That experience is the core of what all business should be really attentive to, because if you can be the best at the value experience, you will beat your competitors.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And just to build on that, Bezos used to talk about working backwards. You called it reverse engineering. He had that term working backwards, but always thinking of the customer first. We tend to talk about entrepreneurship as a better mental model than management. When you're running a billion-dollar corporation, or you're working in a billion-dollar corporation where you've got to have operational excellence and strong processes and so on like that, what does entrepreneurship mean in that context? How do you run that company entrepreneurially?
Well, in academia, in our scholarship, the dividing line between entrepreneurship and management is whether you are creating a new value proposition or replicating a familiar one, right? And so when we're talking about management, you're taking what already works, that customers already are familiar with, and you're trying to streamline. You're trying to make your organization efficient. You're trying to deal with various value chain, supply chain issues, and just make the most profitable business you can with the value knowledge that we already have. But entrepreneurship is about creating new value knowledge. And the modern business has to be entrepreneurial. You cannot succeed long-term on your existing value knowledge, because some entrepreneur is going to create new value knowledge. And if you are not that entrepreneur, you have been left behind.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think entrepreneurship is the only sustainable business strategy.
Wow. Okay. We'll underline that. Entrepreneurship's the only sustainable business strategy. Another bullet point we had was about focusing on businesses' role in the customer's lives. And the customer could be a business customer, a business to consumer, as opposed to operations. And I think that also gets to systems thinking, that you got to think about the business as playing a role in a much bigger system, the economy. You think of the household or the firm as a system. You think about how to fit in and contribute. So is that, when we say businesses' role in customers' lives, is that a systems thinking approach?
Sure. Yeah. Again, this comes from what we call in Austrian economics the consumer sovereignty principle, right? So Operations, of course, matter. It matters that you run a business well, that is well organized, it's efficient. But ultimately, who pays the bills? It's your customers, right? And so focusing first on your customer, the person or the people that pay the bills, and making sure that they are getting what they want and need better than anyone else will keep you in business. All the rest is needs to be built around that.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole system is focused on that customer experience, the customer's value, and the efficiency for their lives, rather than your own streamlined efficiency.
Yeah, and again, we go back to Amazon because Jeff Bezos was so articulate about this. He said, we've got to deliver the customer experience, and then they always want it faster, cheaper, higher quality. You got to keep improving.
Yep.
One of my colleagues, Annika Steiber, in Silicon Valley, talks about the ambidextrous corporation. That's her term for saying you do entrepreneurship and you do everyday operational excellence at the same time in the same company. Is that
Yeah, that's hard to do, because being good at both, there are trade-offs, right? There are trade-offs to expanding your knowledge, and trying new things, and cutting costs and streamlining and organizing. And so having an ambidextrous organization is tough. There's different ways you can do it. For example, you can have your research and development team over here, and then you've got your organizational team working on the efficiencies of the supply chain and so on over here. That's one way, but however you do it, you do need to do both. And so it's a challenge for the modern organization, especially when you get big.
yeah. So getting back to the education that would help corporations in that mode, help them hire people who can fit into that system and contribute to it. We both think, you think, that Austrian economics is a good place to start there. I think most people who are listening probably have a general idea of Austrian economics, although you might lay it out a little bit. But has Austrian economics ever been applied in business? Is there a mechanism, a textbook, a method, a curriculum? Has anybody ever done that?
Yeah, Peter Drucker wrote classic books on management and organization, and he was influenced very strongly by the Austrian school, and he got a whole lot of things right. And honestly, to my thinking, a lot of the challenges, the modern challenges, that a lot of companies face have been due to kind of a departure from some of the more classical thinking that Drucker laid out. But to your point about the Austrian school, the idea of the Austrian school is based on this concept called subjective value, right? So we talk about value being subjective, and basically everybody will agree with that, but not everybody means the same thing when they're talking about value being subjective, right? So if you talk to an economist, a non-Austrian economist, I should say, when they say it's value subjective, what they mean is that everybody has a different utility function. Now, that utility function is given; it's stable. It's basically what everybody values at that time. But what the Austrians mean is that everybody chooses their values, what they value. And that choice is momentary. I mean, we change what we value all the time. And so the economy is far more complex, far more dynamic and evolutionary than most economists and most people really understand. We expect people to be predictable and easily influenced, but they're not. They change their minds. They learn and experience new things, and all of that is changing how they perceive the world, how they think about value and what they want. So the Austrian school really has this very dynamic and evolutionary view of the market that is incessantly being disrupted by entrepreneurs, and it's that entrepreneurship that grows the economy. And so, all economic growth you can pinpoint in the Austrian school to entrepreneurship.
Yeah. We're delighted to announce the Value Creators online course. For entrepreneurs in every kind of business, big, small, or medium, at every stage, in every industry, our course provides the foundations and principles on which to build success. Simple, clear purpose and principles give rise to creativity, innovation, and competitively superior business action. There are 11 foundational principles or mental models that together cohere into the value business model. Principles for value generation, principles for value operations, principles for value finance and accounting, and principles for value sustainability, as well as the new knowledge accumulation you'll need for continuous innovation. These principles are delivered by top business professors from top business schools: Mark Packard, Per Byland, Gordon Miller, David Rapp, and Bart Vanderhagen. You'll find video lessons from them, along with downloadable tools, processes, and other valuable content. Master these lessons, and you'll master the most important skill in business: value creation. Go to thevaluecreators.com and click the course link. Yeah, and Austrian theory was always focused on complexity. We didn't call it back then in the 1930s and 1940s when Hayek and Mises got started. But when you reverse engineer it, to use your term, you can see complexity thinking in spontaneous order and entrepreneurship and that kind of thing.
And it really makes you think differently about your business, right? So how do you treat your customers? How is your focus on your customers? Are you expecting them to just kind of, field of dreams thinking, if you build it, they'll come? Are you really trying to help them see and learn what to value? Or are you trying to kind of manipulate them? If you're kind of following the traditional marketing and management literature, you're really trying to kind of create success, but you don't have that power. If you are an Austrian, you are far more aware of the uncertainties and the challenges and the difficulties that is there. So I think the Austrian school gives you a much better vision and understanding of the economy and the challenges there for managers.
Well, I know you've thought about mapping out an alternative curriculum you called it a master's degree in business, so it may be a lot different than the way we think about that now. You gave it the term a master's in business entrepreneurship, so trying to combine those elements. I don't want you to detail it here, but can you tell us about your thinking as you were composing it to achieve what your goal is?
Well, yeah. This isn't what we've put together so far is not a final draft or anything like that. It's just what do we think are the most important values and knowledge that the modern business leader needs to have, and it is very entrepreneurship centered. So we've got a focus on how the economy works dynamically from an Austrian perspective, right? So the complexities, the dynamism of the market process, and the role of the entrepreneur in that process. And then, of course, what entrepreneurship is, where do ideas come from, how do we come up with ideas, how do we develop good design and innovation. And so it's a different way of thinking about the business. And, we're going to probably include some of the operations as kind of the things you need to know about accounting and finance and, organizational structure and stuff like that. Those are valuable. Those are important. But the most important thing is to develop an entrepreneurial mindset and the skills of entrepreneurial thinking that you don't get in the traditional business school. So that's what the curriculum is designed to do.
And then there's a learning experience that you've been thinking about associated with that. It's not the standard listening to lectures in class and that kind of thing. What's your thinking about the learning experience?
Well, yeah. So, as kind of a capstone, if you want to call it that, or a practicum, maybe, the idea is that we would have partner businesses bring or bring challenges, their real challenges to us, and we would basically place our students in it's almost like an internship, a consultancy solving entrepreneurially these real problems within these companies, and so it's a chance to actually put into action that entrepreneurial thinking that we are teaching and developing for our students. And so, if you look at the traditional business school, the capstone, which I teach the capstone is a strategy course at virtually every business school. The most, the closest we get to actual real experiences, we have these little simulation games.
Mm-hmm.
You get to play this simulation game, and it's not very realistic. And you're not really. There is no entrepreneurship in the simulation, right? It's just positioning your company in this existing industry and competing against other computers. And so we're trying to flip that. We're trying to actually give real learning experience with actual companies that are looking for people that can think entrepreneurially.
So, just as an aside, Mark, thinking about AI and AI simulations, will that change those kinds of things in the future? It will become more dynamic and entrepreneurial because it's simulated by AI?
Well, I mean, different people have different opinions on that, but those of my persuasion are very skeptical of the abilities of AI to think entrepreneurially, right? So AI is trained on historical data, and so what it has at its fingertips are what people have already thought.
Yeah.
And so it can regurgitate what other people have thought. There might even be, in the future, interesting combinations of what people have already thought. But actual creativity, true entrepreneurial type creativity, is is a is something that our minds have this unique capacity to do. Our minds are remarkable, and so as far as I can tell, that is something that we will always need to be doing is entrepreneurship. AI will help. It might even, prompt us with some ideas. It can be a useful tool, but it will never likely be very entrepreneurial.
Yeah, you have a great term in your book, counterfactuals. Humans can do counterfactuals. We can think what might happen in the future if something that hasn't happened would happen.
And I think AI can kind of do that already, but you have to basically tell it what to think for it to work. You have to say, okay, pretend you're, Steve Jobs and making, cakes instead of computers, or something like that. It can like create something, but you have to create the counterfactual conditions for it to do that kind of thinking.
So let's just flip the table a little bit. You mentioned the hiring corporation. They come in and they bring their challenges. The students get to work on those challenges. Let's say they hire some of the students who've been through your business entrepreneurship training. How are they going to change the internals of that company? How will that company go to business differently?
Well, so the problem that companies have right now is that they have a hard time screening people that will actually be able to, first of all, fit the culture, but second of all, think more radically, more entrepreneurially about, through the problems that company needs to solve. And so there's what the current business degree gives companies is this certificate, this credential that this student is intelligent and they can follow directions. You can maybe argue that it gives them a little bit of training, but for most jobs, that training is very minimal what they actually get out of college.
Mm-hmm.
And there's quite a bit of evidence that they don't retain very much of it at all. They remember it just long enough to pass the test. But you don't know anything else about them, about the way they think, about their values and stuff like that. And so what we're hoping to do is do a better job of, first of all, screening students, figuring out, what they value, their values, and fit with certain companies that we might partner with, and do a better job connecting good fit students, graduates, with positions that they will succeed in. But most of all, we want to train these students, as we said, in this way of thinking that will, how to say this, most companies need people to just follow orders.
Mm-hmm.
They need their grunts that do a good job of what they're told to. But those types of people can't adapt to a changing environment very, very quickly. They need someone else to basically do the changing for them and point them into a different direction. But a lot of organizations can't afford to have employees that aren't very adaptive like that. They need people that are intelligent, that are bright, that are adaptable, but not just that, but that are actively solving their problems. And so that's what we're going to be developing is students that new hires that can solve problems and find problems better than any other graduates out there.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the graduates are basically taught how to do things. Use these tools, use this SWOT analysis or 5 4s, but they're not taught. That stuff is more constraining of the imagination and the problem solving than it is opening up your mind to ways of thinking. So we're trying to avoid that, and I think it's badly needed.
So will those new entrants be able to change the culture of existing corporations, do you think? How long will that take? How does that work?
Well, to a large extent, we're actually hoping to save company culture by matching people that already share that company's values. But, sometimes company culture is toxic and needs to be changed, and you need problem solvers to come in and help solve that and address those issues. So that's another entrepreneurial thinking type challenge that a lot of companies struggle with.
Yeah.
Creating good entrepreneurial culture is tough, and it comes from on top. If you have people on top that are stuck in old ways, that trickles down into a very static and unmalleable type of culture.
Yeah, although the entrepreneurial way of thinking is not top down, right? It's either bottom up, or it's a flat network, or it's a free exchange of ideas. It's open, it's dynamic, as you say. So we're going to make available a first online offering of the style of business education. It's not a full course or degree yet, but it's the Value Creators online course. You've designed a lot of it. There's a kind of a trilogy in there, Mark, that you give: 3 of the video presentations, learning sessions. understanding value, which you've touched upon, cultivating empathy as a business skill, which is an interesting new direction, and the creative design process. So I think of that as a kind of core trilogy of the three things that Austrian economics and subjectivism brings to business. Is that a good way of thinking of it?
Yeah, I mean, I won't say that my courses, my mini lectures are the best of the program. But yeah, those are very much the core of the way that we think about and want to train our students. And we hope your listeners will subscribe to this and go through this course, these lectures, because they're in a very short amount of time very helpful in changing the way you think about business in such a way that you become an entrepreneurial thinker, right? So just understanding value from the subjectivist view will change the way you think about business. When you learn about empathy, you will connect with your customers in ways that you never thought about before. And then, of course, in design, I'll pitch that one too, since I did that one. When you focus on the right things, the way you design becomes so important, but also easier, just because you understand or you're focusing on the right things. And so I think what we've put together is going to be incredibly valuable. We're hoping, I think, that not only your listeners, but their employees or coworkers will also get put onto this course, and I think we can do a lot of good.
Good, yeah, it's exciting. And there's another way of thinking in there that you also originated, the value learning cycle. I can't call it a tool anymore because you said tools are constraining, so I've got to think of another term for it. I was talking to Bill Aulette the other day, who wrote something called Disciplined Entrepreneurship. He calls it a full use cycle, but I think it's the same thing. It's what you said about starting from how the customer perceives value, how they evaluate, how they experience, how they assess, and they come back again, but they've changed. And so it's a dynamic way of thinking of the cycle, right?
Yes. This is all about our learning process, because we are, as I say in my research, and I try to teach this to my students all the time, we are all the time experiencing value. And the reason why we try new things, we try something new on the menu, or try to, go a different way on the way home or something like that, is we're trying to figure out better ways of living our life. And this value learning cycle is the core of entrepreneurial thinking. Entrepreneurial thinking is ultimately trying to figure out a higher state of value knowledge. And so if you can understand how that process works, you can accelerate it. You can do it better.
Good. And then there are a number of other modules in the course in addition to yours, Mark, including Per Byland talking about how to think about entrepreneurship, how to think about customer understanding. We've got a little bit of finance and accounting. We've got some marketing. And so it is a full cycle. One of the ways we're thinking about this is it might be a supplement for folks who don't have a business degree or got their business degree some times ago. And we think about it as a skill set plus the value creation education. So, for example, I have this term in my head about engineers with empathy. You've got an engineering capacity, capability, you're valuable in the economy, but if you can add understanding of value to it, understanding of empathy, then you're a better contributor to business. Is that a good way to think about it?
Yeah. One of the things that I teach in my classes, and it was actually part of my dissertation, is that ideation, that innovation, that spark of the aha moment, comes at the intersection of your technical knowledge, which is all the facts that you know, everything that you know about what things do and how they work. It's the intersection of that technical knowledge with your needs knowledge, what you understand are people's problems, their needs. And by understanding people better, understanding how they experience the world and how they feel about it and how they experience their needs, that intersection of good technical knowledge and good needs knowledge produces amazing ideas, huge breakthroughs.
Another group we've thought about like that, maybe differently, Mark, is people who maybe come up through history or philosophy at the undergraduate level or somewhere in their education. They may not think they're well attuned to business, but in fact, if they add your thinking about the value creation way of thinking, they become super valuable because they're already embedded in that kind of subjectivist thinking.
Someone, I don't remember who to credit for this, but someone pointed out that a lot of the most successful entrepreneurs were philosophy majors in their undergraduate. And I thought that was interesting because thinking about the world and being open-minded about it, about how things work, and looking for truth and for better ways of thinking about things leads people to insights that otherwise get overlooked. We let our minds get so trapped in the way things are always done that it becomes very difficult, if not impossible, to see things any other way. And that's the closing of the entrepreneurial mindset. And I fear that's what business schools are doing to our students. And so if we can open that back up, if you can become a philosopher, every one of us can be a philosopher. Every single one of us can be a technologist. We can learn that stuff. It's not just for, Elon Musk or, all these Mark Andreessen and these very, nerdy people that are very, very smart. You can learn that stuff. You just have to do it. The only thing that's keeping you from it is that you're not interested in it enough. You haven't gotten into it. So once you become this big learner, you will learn so much and it will open up all kinds of ideas for you.
There's one more industry we've thought about where we might change the whole industry with this way of thinking, and that's medicine and healthcare. And we're thinking of the vehicle of the direct primary care doctors who are thinking, boy, I can have a entrepreneurial relationship with my patients. I can set up my own practice, not be part of the big healthcare blob. And so there's a vocation, medicine, trying to help people already, and value creation thinking. That's exciting, I think, too.
Amen. Yes. My doctor is a direct primary care doctor here in Florida, and she's great. She does a great job, and I think this is the future of medicine. The big challenge for the medical industry that direct primary care to some extent is overcome is that the huge regulatory burdens which stand in the way of entrepreneurship and innovation in that sector. And so I'm very optimistic that there can be a whole lot more entrepreneurship in medicine. I think the direct primary care and the the Surgery Center of Oklahoma and some of these other types of medicine industry innovations and entrepreneurship are going to change the world. And we just need more entrepreneurs in that space.
Good. Well, we'll link to the online course, Mark. We'll make it available to people. We look forward to feedback. Just as a kind of wrap up, I'm going to ask you a little bit of an abstract question. I'm not sure it's very answerable, but I'm fascinated by this idea of a different way of thinking, a way of thinking that departs from the traditional way of thinking about business. How can we all help ourselves to do that? Is it self-observation? I'm living in this framework that's restricting me, or is it experimentation, where let me just try things and see where it goes? How can we launch ourselves into a new way of thinking?
Yeah, I think it is introspective in the sense that your value knowledge is based on your own experience. And so you can really learn a whole lot just by introspecting on your experiences of value. When we go throughout our day, we are doing the same things over and over again, and we never pause to think, is there a better way of doing this?
Mm-hmm.
But that's the entrepreneurial mindset, is to pause and say, why do I do it this way? What is the job I'm trying to do? Is there a better way to do that job? Or am I even doing something is that job even worth doing?
Yeah.
And so that's really the ultimate entrepreneurial mindset, but it's not just your own experience, right? Entrepreneurship's ultimately about solving other people's problems. And so you can learn a lot from other people as well. But yeah, I think we've got a lot to teach people, and I'm hopeful that we can do a lot of good by introducing people to these entrepreneurship ideas and this way of thinking.
Good. Well, it's an exciting time, I think, in business and business education, Mark. So thank you so much for today. Thanks for all you do in thinking differently, and we'll hope to get feedback from folks on the ideas and the learning and the education and the experience that we're offering. So thank you very much.
Very good. It's good to talk to you, Hunter.
You too, Mark.
This has been another episode of the Value Creators Podcast. Thanks for listening. You can visit thevaluecreators.com for links and resources related to this episode, and check out hunterhastings.com for more content on entrepreneurial business management based on value creation principles.